Hey guys, I'm John Mosho, and you're listening to Knick Knack Goes to the Movies, the one-stop shop podcast for all things movie, TV, and pop culture.
Turns out he's a major cinephile. They don't watch enough movies! It's a very simple formula! And here we go. Hey you, I'm still Nick, and this is Knick Knack Goes to the Movies, your one-stop shop podcast for all things movie, TV, and pop culture. This is finally it, the big episode you've all been waiting for. I've seemingly endlessly brought up WandaVision on the last few who knows how many episodes, and it's time for the full episode dedicated to the first of many Marvel TV shows airing exclusively on Disney+. So might as well fill in this 1 week gap before the next one, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, drops the following week, along with the wildly anticipated 4-hour plus Justice League Snyder Cut. Next week is going to be overflowing with super content. But now that we've had a week to process, much like Wanda herself and her journey in the show, the full miniseries, let us finally together discuss and answer the question we've all been wanting to know. Was the first of these experiments outside of the movie theater for Marvel a magical ride? Or is this a series that just didn't work with that creative vision? We know Star Wars shows can work on Disney+, so Marvel, you're up on deck. So before we get too far into the show, let's put it out there. Major spoiler alert. These may not be intentional, but please, if you haven't yet watched this Marvel sitcom fare, please do that prior to listening to this episode. Pause it here, watch it this weekend if you haven't yet. It will not take you too long to finish. And then come on back to this episode and rate it 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. Write a lovely review while you're at it. But you should also not come into this without being somewhat caught up on the MCU as a whole. You minimally should watch Age of Ultron, Civil War, Infinity War, and Endgame. There is more you can watch, more supplemental material. And if you watch all those movies, you'll get even more out of this. Much like The Mandalorian, if you've not only seen the films, but also the animated Clone Wars and Rebel shows, you get a little something special out of it. So watch all of that at least, and now we can all begin, now that we're all caught up. The show actually kicks off right away in a way you might be a bit lost about, coming from the end of Endgame, where Vision is famously dead. But this show, especially by the end of the first episode, is very much a mystery that you can watch and uncover and speculate as you go. This, as a weekly show, was an antagonizing wait, but also a blast to guess what was going to happen and comb through every scene for hidden clues to further confirm or bring up entirely new theories. But if you have not had that chance, having them all at once to just binge on through, it's a lovely treat, for sure. Knowing me, you may think the show would be far from my cup of Vita Coco. Sitcoms, not always my thing, or rarely the thing that does it for me. But sometimes, the Marvel name drags me into things that I would not always take a dive into. The amount of bad Sean Bean movies I've seen just to see Sean Bean is staggering. Best actor around. And besides this being advertised as a prequel to Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, something that has been billed as a horror movie, like I said, this is not just a Marvel sitcom. So the Marvel leads returning are Elizabeth Olsen, who had a few sisters in the sitcom world of Full House, but never made an appearance herself as Wanda Maximoff, and Paul Bettany as Vision, who spent 4 Marvel movies just as a voice until becoming an acting character who physically exists in the world. He also had quite a few turns in other movies that I've enjoyed, such as Priest, A Knight's Tale, and most recently Solo. After that, we have a few very fun return for some secondary Marvel characters, both Kat Dennings as Darcy Lewis from the Thor series, and Randall Park as Jimmy Woo from the second Ant-Man, joining an ensemble cast with an older version of Monica Rambeau, played by Teyana Paris, to round out the big three. The internet and TikTok blew up with Randall Park fever, seemingly uncovering each and every role of his, current 153 strong on his IMDb page. Catherine Hahn and Josh Stamberg also joined in the fun as new roles to their MCU debuts. Their true roles were speculated throughout the season and up until the final episode, with Han being the witch Agatha Harkness and Stanberg being the current head of the different agency of S.W.O.R.D. as opposed to the earlier movie's government group S.H.I.E.L.D. Acronyms being words already is a blast. For all you AHS fans, you probably are one, as my best episode to this date is still the first one, all about the soon-to-be 10-season series. The appearance of anything Evan Peters, especially in a Marvel thing given his X-Men character's lineage, has most of us pretty stoked as to who he is in this. That is something that we will get into. But overall, looking at the show, especially from the get-go, the time period aspect of going from one to the next, and it's like it's a gas. I mean, I'm all about it. The music, the setting, and the loving references to shows of old, which if you grew up with any of these, you will immediately recognize them as your adoration for them. The first few episodes are even shot in 4:3 aspect ratio to really bring home the point. This blend of sitcom hijinks and actually questions the Matrix-like nature of reality. It's a fun blend that sounds like it would not work, but the leads and all of the supporting cast make this a fun romp that is constantly leaving you guessing. The sitcom fans will love the wild, oh no, what is going to happen next moments and their levity. These moments are fun, especially because it's brief and not almost 200 episodes of I Love Lucy. It never feels like you're stuck in the same world for too long, especially with the decade and type of show constantly changing and evolving as the series progresses, like a tour through television sitcom history 1 decade at a time. It's charming and does kind of make you smile. It's easy to forget this is not only a Marvel show, but it actually has eventual deeper ties to the future of the MCU. But if there is one moment in the show early on, episode 1, that got me good, it has to be their sitcom and strange staying in character reaction of laughing as one of the characters is choking out and Vision having to use his phasing power to stop the guy from choking. And even with that crazy, stressful moment, it all ends, as all sitcoms do, as a happy ending with fun recurring jokes. But that one moment, that singular time of just breaking character and even Wanda's voice becoming her European one, it sets the early seeds as to something being a bit off, but in the best way. And if you watch this for the second time, the other members of Westview asking why they're all here, leading a bit to the overall theme of issues and how this whole thing has happened. And while these episodes' lengths are hilariously long based on some massive credits unlike those, there's one thing that is a bit out of left field that still has some good story hints. And boy, do they utilize these fake commercial breaks to get us going and thinking about what everything means. The first episode's commercial has an obvious reference to Stark Industries, but just that subtle line at the end of forgetting the past for Wanda loaded with trauma and living in this fake reality. And if there's one question, one word to describe what this show is, it's all about overcoming grief and trauma. I guess that's not one word, that's a phrase. Anyway, something that is almost woven into the fabric of this podcast, partly because of how much we discuss horror, but for other reasons too. Thank goodness this was a TV show and not a movie. The episodic format, especially with it being a show within a show, fits perfectly here. And if it wasn't, how would we get all these, for the most part, amazing theme songs? Episode 1 is good, but that WandaVision episode 2 thing stole the show until the Addams Family themed Agatha All Along came to challenge it for musical supremacy. We will for sure be doing our Nick Neck Goes to the Movies list all about the musical stylings given to us by WandaVision. Like a good or even bad horror movie, a show like this is even better the second time through to see all the little hints and references. And so early in the first 2 episodes, WandaVision decides to drop these little crumbs of how the situation came to be. It takes all the way to episode 4, an episode that takes place almost entirely outside of the Westview anomaly, to even get a brief understanding of how this whole thing came to be. But early on, we are just along for the fun ride. And while the further down the rabbit hole we go with this show, more and more hints of things that we all thought were going to happen. Look, it's no secret people thought we were going to see Doctor Strange at a minimum, but maybe John Krasinski as Mr. Fantastic, who has not been officially cast as far as I know. Mephisto, Marvel's version of the Devil, 1 or 2 Quicksilvers, either the dead one or the X-Men one, or maybe even a little Magneto, either played by Michael Fassbender or Ian McKellen. And little lines like the devil is in the details or having a scientist friend really fed those theories. We know Marvel wants to integrate all their Fox characters, including the Fantastic Four and the entire X-Men family. Both have movies on the way. But how they're going to do it is a real question. Have they always been here? Which seems like a little bit of a tough explanation. Will they start fresh? Or will they somehow come together after this multiverse saga like the CW did in Crisis on Infinite Earths? While we may not have gotten most of these things, the jury is still out on one of them. We do see some more attention to detail as we go. Agnes, as she was known early on, was always pushing Wanda to have kids in some capacity for her nefarious deeds. Monica, Geraldine in the TV show version, didn't know who she was until she and Wanda touched and she became a part of the world a little more. We really all thought for a moment that all these people were living in this fantasy world and it wasn't Wanda at the heart of it because she's an Avenger. Can't believe it. While I may not resonate as much with some of the episodes, they're always fun. But the best part of these, especially the ones that might feel a bit slower, are those moments of uncertainty or wonder as to what is actually going on. Seeing a few of the out-of-place things in color, or things that aren't part of the storyline that is being told on this fake TV show. Hearing Jimmy Woo, more like Jimmy Swoon, for the first time. And so many of these early moments have people fighting what turns out to be her control and feeling not aggressively, but just a bit hostile towards her. Things that never really happened to Vision, spoiler alert, as he is not actually really there. Or at least the Vision that we know is not really there. It's a whole new Vision. It's a little complex. He is closer to those without free will living out the story than either Wanda or Agatha. Gosh, this is so much fun watching, now knowing what the end game is, pun intended. While we have a few Hydra hints throughout, it feels less fun and hinty and more of a reminder to me of how mishandled parts of the Hydra story were in the MCU. Look, they don't really matter now, let's be real. With all the space threats and grand villains, Hydra really would take a lot to get them back into the fold. But having Strucker played by the amazing Thomas Kretschmann, what a wasted opportunity. And playing off a little bit as a joke, as the whole organization was. They had great moments in the first Captain America movie, as well as the sequel, The Winter Soldier. Even super early Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. had some great betrayal moments to follow this timeline. The most that show felt as a tie to the MCU. It's pretty much all gone now. But at least Chloe Bennett, titular star of that show as Quake, will be suiting up in a new superhero suit in the CW live-action version of the Powerpuff Girls. Not joking, real story, real show that is happening. I haven't seen Riverdale. I know Jen, I'll get there eventually. Can't speak to what they did there. But if they can pull off Powerpuff Girls live-action somehow, making it enjoyable and real, and I don't know how they're going to do it, but if they can, color me super impressed. And with a few Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. alums in there, hopefully they can make Professor Utonium as Agent Coulson, aka Clark Gregg. Bring him back, baby. Let's see what they get. But back to this show. As a fan of oldies, seeing the magical transformations from black and white to color, super cool. The period piece lover in me is such a fan, and throw that in with some of the better, creepier what is going on moments as the show goes, things might be off. But there's something more uneasy with the first few episodes of really not knowing at all what is going on, especially when the show goes out of its way to not hide Wanda somewhat being in control of this world, going as far as to rewind and rewrite her reality as she sees fit, something that will for sure play a part in that Doctor Strange follow-up film. As much as I get the time periods, it takes until the third of these episodes for me to super vibe with the intro song and setup being a clear Brady Bunch reference. While the show never truly sets Wanda and Vision as enemies, obviously, seeing those moments of unease that he starts to truly develop in the third episode, the penultimate one before we at least get somewhat of an answer into seeing things that aren't quite right. Now, as true fans of the show, Some of these moments could be Wanda not fully having control of this massive world, or it could be Agatha all along, who's been messing with everything and all that. What a bop. But that song is a bit misleading, with Agatha more being a minor nuisance for the majority of the show. Episode 3 might actually be one of the slower ones. But man, at the end of that episode, when they name drop Ultron, talking about Pietro, this was when the start of all the rumors of what happens next, and also why they kept pushing Age of Ultron so hard at the end of every episode. We wanted to know, would Ultron and James Spader make an appearance somehow? Who else could be in here? And of course, things really go wild when Wanda yeets Monica right out of Westview. And of course, this all leads to the amazing moment of our screen aspect ratio shifting to the traditional modern-day 16:9 to really get us into how this fantasy exists in comparison to the modern-day real world. And we got some Monkees music in what I would consider their best song in Daydream Believer. I know it's not Last Train to Clarksville, or the most known, especially because of Shrek and I'm a Believer, a masterclass in a non-Disney movie, at least the first two. Man, did WandaVision come into its full 2021 popularity boom when the first non-sitcom episode dropped. We have an amazing take on how the blip, while a good thing, was actually super chaotic, stressful, and traumatic, coming to terms with missing multiple years. That is how we meet the adult daughter of Captain Marvel mom Maria Rambeau. That hospital scene alone is astonishing and chaotic in the best possible way. Now, I love the sitcom parts, but there are people who watch this show, and I just wasn't going to be their cup of tea. Like them, I am mad excited for Falcon and the Winter Soldier, but this show was such a risk from the standard Marvel's content, and hopefully, knowing what we know now, the full body of work is weird and marvelly enough to get everyone to enjoy it. And if for no other reason to try WandaVision, Episode 4 brings you Randall Park as FBI agent Jimmy Woo, blowing up social media and single-handedly rebranding the MCU as the MCU. You might have to see Ant-Man and the Wasp to fully appreciate it, but his close-up magic card trick for his ID, some would say that is the greatest character development to ever exist in the MCU to date. His whole deal also leads to not only the fun tandem of him, Monica, and Darcy, back from the MCU and the Thor franchise, but what he also does is lead us to one of the many and most intriguing plot threads that has been left dangling by the series for now. I was going to go chronologically here, but I cannot wait any longer. People wondered who Evan Peters was on set. Was he Mephisto, maybe Nick Scratch, son of Agatha, or some version of Quicksilver? Hopefully the Time in a Bottle X-Men Multiverse one specifically. While most were a bit disappointed by the Ralph Boner explanation and being controlled by Agatha the whole time, and having some powers, but not the same ones, and not being played by brother and fellow kick-ass actor Aaron Taylor Johnson. But if he is this witness protection character Jimmy Woo is after, a new name, maybe he is the X-Men version, and maybe somehow this will be explored in the Doctor Strange sequel and bring the X-Men and Spider-Verse of the past all together to make a bond of maybe Jimmy Woo and this version of Pietro will come up to pass and have just a fun relationship. I don't know. We're just fantasizing about ideas of the future now. Some of these episodes are true setup, right? With world building and combining the two time periods to make things make a bit more sense. But it has some horror light moments sprinkled in of seemingly having her playing make-believe with Vision's dead body, which is pretty wild. Although we all know now that that's not even exactly what's happening, since in reality, her Vision is not physically there, and really, this one only exists in Wanda's memories and the physical manifestation of him in Wandaland. Full House WandaVision, actually one of the most exciting, with a clear conflict actually on display of there being a real issue between Wanda and Vision, something that she can't fully erase with her magical Premiere Pro Adobe editing powers. Yes, the video editing me nerd came out, and that's how I edit all my podcasts, so thank you, Adobe. This is also the start of blending these two stories. Not sure how they could have done it chronologically. I'm sure this could have been more accessible, tackling both stories from the get-go, but the mystery existing from the beginning and throwing you in with no explanation. It's a wild idea that, once again, was a huge risk, especially with the first of these shows. If the first doesn't go well, you always get nervous how much more they can do afterwards. But starting with this as opposed to Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which would have been a safer bet, paid off in spades. There is no doubt this was a good show, especially for Marvel media aficionados. Maybe comic book folks would dislike this a bit, not as a sum of its parts, but with the wild expectations. The theories were a ton of fun. Sadly, that has lost a bit being able to watch it in one straight shot. And even if you avoided most of the spoilers, I think you will realize while it sets up a ton of future MCU movies and Disney Plus shows, you definitely got something with Secret Invaders, you definitely got Doctor Strange, you definitely got Captain Marvel 2, just a few things thrown in there. It does not get us an Ultron revival, it doesn't introduce us to a John Krasinski, Reed Richards, doesn't bring forth the dawn of the X-Men or even one X-Men. Not definitively, but as of now, we can assume Bonner is actually Sweet Dreams Time in a Bottle Pietro Maximoff. But that does not make it a bad show. And while the sitcoms, they're a hoot, seeing Wanda for the first time interact with the outside world in all her distress and rage, it does a great job of painting her as a villain that would prove all of the DCEU and Civil War hero theories that superpowered people are bad and need to be controlled. In short, however, this is really just one of the stages of grief overall with rage and anger. But you really hope the Marvel future can lead a bit more to her ties with Magneto and being evil even if he is recast. And unrelated, this show is at its best trying to teach morals, like all sitcoms do, while having our characters go through them at the same time. Having Wanda have to teach her kids about dealing with grief, while she herself has made this whole altered reality to avoid her continued feelings of sadness. This podcast is pretty much fully based on dealing with grief and trauma. And in these moments, I know that not only was this a show just good for me to watch as a whole phenomenal choice, but as a good selection to explore further in this podcast medium. The commercials, the plot, and the plot within the plot of her world are all hinting and exploring these things. And I, as we are all, dealing with feeling terrible. And while a lot of people use shows like Full House and The 70s Show, and to modern day comparisons The Office and Friends, all of these are to watch something moderately relatable, but more so to melt into a world and feel things that will always feel safe and turn out better, and everything will be alright in the world. Comfort viewing, to be sure. As dedicated viewers and people who know real life Nick know, but to you new listeners out there, I very much, half-jokingly, watch things that are dark and depressing, sort of my MO. And that is, to a degree, very true. But personally, I feel like sitcoms are a hollow attempt to force good feelings on people and make false the idea that things will just magically work out. My comfort viewer is seeing things go wrong and tell myself, well, at least I'm not getting chased around by a mask-wearing, chainsaw-wielding specter. Either that or get lost in a world experience that I will never experience in my time. The grand fantasies of Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, or Harry Potter. Still waiting and holding out hope for my Hogwarts lair to come by. I would like to say I can't wait to be a Ravenclaw when that happens, but according to that Harry Potter official app, I'm apparently a Slytherin, which at the time was a bit of a bummer, but looking at it, it kind of, or really does make sense for dark and depressing Nick. Back to the show, and this whole show, that conflict moment between the loving couple and having her try to run away from it and end the show, her show, on a happy note while the credits roll to get back to her happy day tomorrow and not end without a happy ever after. I love it. Bring the chaos and the realism that things don't just end happily because you wish on a star or hope they do. It's why Princess and the Frog, while the end of a certain style of Disney animation, is one of the best and most realized morals of the importance of hard work. That and the amazing music that rivals Hercules. I know, it's a knockout punch. While this Halloween episode they have, love a good themed episode, especially Halloween. The theme song, I hate it. Painful theme song. But the inclusion of Evan Peters' cliffhanger Sadly, only one full episode he's in is this one. Love it. And of course, my mind wanders to a hopeful 2021 Halloween of dressing as any version of him. The X-Men one, the cheesy Halloween one, or the good old Ralph Boner. I miss dressing up and hopefully going to some sort of festive party. And while we may have touched on it already, but having these crazy long credits, only to have a post-credit scene in the last 3 episodes, Marvel fans are trained to stay till the very end, and this is a weird way to mess with us. We have a super brief Pietro moment with a Snoop was gonna Snoop line, and we sideline both him and Monica for a whole episode after that. We get a look at White Vision for the first time, and a few teasers to the future with both Monica and Wanda. But speaking of costumes, this Halloween episode and show as a whole should be the Harley Quinn of the past. Wrestler Vision, comic accurate Wanda are a blast to see here in a fun attention to detail kind of way, and to a degree the Quicksilver costume as well. And the kids in this version, a bit more grown up, really add to fleshing out their personalities a bit, and they have their comic accurate costumes as well. We really do hope they will have a long future in the MCU. I mean, yes, we know where things stand at the end of the show, but those post-credit scenes hint at them being at least somewhat important to Doctor Strange too. And with a younger squad waiting to form, there are a few fun pieces that they could add to that, for sure. Also, while Randall Park and Jimmy Woo is not the focus of this show, but the Marvel X-Files premise does sound fun. Seeing him in action punch out a few sword agents and get coffee for his new friends, gosh, we love him in this show. And if you want more of him, there's a ton to pick from his back catalog. But might I recommend The Interview, where he is joined by James Franco and Seth Rogen and dunks a basketball. His acting is on point there. As we go through the show, more and more theory lines feel either throwaway or more set up for an eventual Mephisto reveal at the end of the multiverse arc. A character not seen in movies since the 2007 Nicolas Cage Ghost Rider film, which, while not good, had some moments and the Ghost Rider special effects look good, if nothing else. Having fake Pietro, say Unleash Hell Demon Spawn, you have to love and hope the direction and double meaning there is going to pay off eventually. And while it will never relate to anything, even a brief moment of the Quicksilvers being in Kick-Ass together, a lovely non-Marvel superhero franchise. Chef's kiss. Perfection. While this Halloween episode is peak form WandaVision, having her not only dress up as a witch, role we all kind of expected, and having a cackle to boot. What foreshadowing. I do wish we had more Pietro after this episode, something we clearly missed out on overall. But having Wanda immediately throw fake Pietro to save her fake Vision falling apart piece by piece and seemingly really heightening the conflict. All about it. But man, you really wish he could have been in one more episode as opposed to just the end of the penultimate episode. But watching him for chunks of this episode, you can tell he's just a mouthpiece for Agatha, asking her questions, wondering how she magically power-wise was able to concoct this reality. And yes, another death, and I say this liberally, jump scare for Pietro all shot up is great. I really hope they mean real horror when referring to the Multiverse of Madness episode. If we want to talk themes, the last of the real thematic trips through television history ends in episode 7. The Modern Family / The Office storyline and setup may not exactly be my full favorite, and parts of this, especially the Vision storyline, feels incredibly like filler content, but Agatha seemingly being the one to keep Wanda and Vision apart, while this also being her big reveal moment. And yes, that song, Agatha All Along, was the reason I needed to have a good chunk of these both on my iPhone and Spotify. And yes, the full themes playlist is available and shared on Knickknack Social, so have at it. Her big reveal has to be stated by the amazing tease of biting a kid once. Man, did we all think she ate them kids. But before we dive too hard into Agatha Agnes, this episode brings a full arc based on depression and sadness, and Wanda going through it for us to all see. Much needed and so good, even if it is a bit sitcom-ified, before the next episode where it's on full display. One last thing before this. Seeing Kat Dennings in WandaVision, the show itself, inside the show, and not being a waitress from like Two Broke Girls, missed opportunity. and never seeing Randall Park in the sitcom world as a huge sitcom person himself, crazy missed opportunities. And yes, the commercials, like we said, are very telling in this, but people really made a fuss about this latest one, having very clearly stated your own reality lines and mentioning the Nexus, which brings up multiverse hints, as well as this theory that she herself is going to be the Nexus and the catalyst for the multiverses coming together, the bridge and connection to every locale spread out through all Marvel history. This sounds very similar to Crisis on Infinite Earths from the CW, doesn't it? While we get superpowered Monica, even though we don't really see her in action, there was this thrown away plot idea of having them have to fight Senor Scratchy, the rabbit. Would have seen her rescue the kids from the basement and seen the rabbit mean something and the whole Nicholas Scratch character. Didn't happen. It's fine. But the one amazing reveal we did get, and a magical song to boot, was Wanda's discovery of the creepy Agatha witch basement. Easily the highlight moment of the show, with this reveal of the magical book floating in the MCU. The Darkhold, it was in Runaways, it was in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Apparently we're going to bop that all to the back burner and say it didn't happen because seemingly she's had this book, Agatha, for ages. She also has Wanda's twins, and being the show's, to this point, primary antagonist. Like we said, saying it was Agatha all along is wild and inaccurate, as Wanda is really the main villain and protagonist at the same time. But Agatha is the primary nuisance, followed by Hayward's eventual less of villainy, more so self-serving nature. But that Agatha all along song by itself slaps, and the sequence with her meddling throughout the show, sensational. But killing their dog Sparky, tough to balance that crime and how gosh darn catchy the song is. But man, if you gotta watch out, killing dogs is like prime time for John Wick to come in and wreck things. And we'll see if Keanu Reeves does end up being Adam Warlock. It's possible. I don't know if it's guaranteed, but it feels like that could be something, right? Just throwing out some casting that makes sense to me, at least. The final 2 episodes really changed the tone of clearly not being in fun TV show romp anymore and really put us in the end game of the show. But I do have to say, while I like some moments here, there were some missed opportunities in the penultimate episode, and the final, to be fair. Things we love, especially coming off Sabrina, having old-timey Salem, Massachusetts, where I live right now, witchy things. Sadly, no Gavin Leatherwood, Nick Scratchier, but having actual magic be further introduced into the MCU outside of Doctor Strange, and giving some strong realism to the J.B. Smoove line in Spider-Man Far From Home about witches existing and being the root of all evil and his fear of that. Love him in that movie, but even more so in the amazing BET show Real Husbands of Hollywood with Kevin Hart, Nick Cannon, Nelly, and so many more. It's a great parody of all manner of trashy reality TV, and it's a perfect show that's also a little weird. Highly recommend it. While a lot of this penultimate episode is a bit like Ghosts of Christmas Past, there is some fun plot development in seeing Wanda love sitcoms so much in her living experience, and even seeing some of those same show moments of sitcoms she watched as a kid showing up in her personal safe place sitcom world. It's neat. And yes, it is a nice touch to finally show this traumatic moment of her and Pietro just sitting waiting for that Tony Stark bomb to go off, thinking it was defective, but rewriting the moments to show the truth that her early witch powers kept them safe. And of course, that sitcoms kept her sane and feeling safe internally during these times. But if there's one huge letdown, it's seeing a for sure flashback moment, something we have at least touched on in the movies with her and the staff, and somehow not finding some way to show any version of Aaron Taylor Johnson's Quicksilver during their power testing moments, or at most, maybe showing Baron Strucker. They both had huge wasted potential in the same movie, making Hydra a joke after how great they were in Winter Soldier. I know that you had to kill someone in Age of Ultron. They don't kill off hero characters often, Yondu being one of the big ones until all the Endgame deaths. Yes, I love me some Michael Rooker, and to this day wonder if maybe he'll appear in some flashback episode with Norman Reedus in The Walking Dead. Don't think so. Hopefully he has a fun time in the Suicide Squad James Gunn movie. And if anything else, this episode has that powerful line of, what is grief if not love persevering? It blew up on social media, much like Jimmy Woo. Some loved it. Everyone loved Jimmy Woo. But to this line, it was mixed reactions. Some thought it was a little too much and a little cheesy. I personally loved it because obviously I love any and all exploration of grief and trauma. My favorite kind of show and tell. And while it takes a while to get there, we get some really nice payoff and reveals. For start, we see Hayward being kind of a dick, hiding some things, and a little bit of a self-serving liar. And two, more importantly, we have an amazing callback to the first episode. The heart on the calendar that they weren't sure what date it meant was a reference to a special date they were supposed to move into their forever home. And all this emotional trauma and grief just explodes out in a magical outburst from Wanda. Something that we can all relate to, not the magic part, maybe, but either in the past or very strained present or always. I know which category I fall into. It's just having that emotional release of just, damn it. And before the big end, we have this big reveal, of course, and the rationale behind it of being not just Wanda, but giving her her nickname. She's a Scarlet Witch. We have been waiting for it since her first intro to the MCU. The final episode is much closer to the standard Marvel fare. High stakes, multiple action fight scenes, and it is a visual blast. And Evan Peters, for his brief on-screen time, is a ton of goofy, quirky fun in his fights. This is the Halloween costume for me. That is the first, and the comic version of Quicksilver is my second option. We'll see where I go with. The fights are great, and I love the family coming together as a whole, and even that they have some weapon hat stealing fun that comes from the X-Men speedster. And man, is it going to be fun when we have them back together with us in live action. They're going to be the best part of Young Avengers, no doubt. I will say, this is also the true moment where you realize Hayward's not good. You can't try to shoot kids. Not a good look. And thankfully we get some fun of Monica's power, their powers. A nice little bonding moment that we have that we didn't really have throughout the show prior. Also, back to Wanda, the lead of our show. Her new comic outfit is a blend of the version from the comics, a more modern look. That new look is like so good. For the most part, Marvel and the MCU find a way to make their characters look good. Not sure how good Fat Thor or Brainy Hulk are, but pretend those don't exist for the moment and instead focus on how close her costume matches with Fassbender Magneto and hope they both exist together one day. Unlike one of her sitcoms, it's crazy that the show actually doesn't end with a true happy ending. The people of Westview and others around the world once again fear her and will continue to do so. She still lost her whole family again, but at least she is continuing to work on her grief and eventually, maybe not for the best, mess with reality a bit more to try and bring that family back. The biggest takeaway from the finale is expectations and wild theories versus what we got. Would it have been wild to have White Vision be Ultron or have his voice somewhere in there? Having a clear Evan Peters Quicksilver, a Mephisto, or Mr. Fantastic appearance, sure. All that and more would have been swell. And it is wild, we still don't have any visual sighting of Doctor Strange throughout the show. We have one reference to him and that's it. Makes no sense. But look at the show for what it is, what we got, and the sum of all its parts. And it's really fun, unique, and it's a surprisingly deep piece of content we got from a company where things normally blow up and fly around. Mind you, I like that content as well. And the setup of Wanda messing further with reality to start this multiverse, the hopeful hint of Evan Peters still being a Quicksilver, hopefully the one that we want. We don't know. He could be Jimmy Woo's witness protection person. We don't know. There's so many more options of things that could happen too. But before we fade to black on this one, let's get into that musical list of every theme from this magical show. And yes, you can find this playlist on Spotify, and we will have a link out for sure. So here it is, the list ranking the theme songs of WandaVision. Number 8, the one where they're just yelling. I know it's a show that a lot of people like in Malcolm in the Middle based on that. I don't like the yelling at all. I think it's an awful song. Unlistenable for me. Unlistenable. Number 7, we're going to go WV2000. Yeah, it's like The Office, neat, but you could always just listen to, the Lil Wayne Office mashup song, and that fits that void. Don't need anything else. Those two, I think, are the two that I just don't care about a whole lot. Number 6, you may not have considered this as one of them, but I do. The end theme, Wanda's theme, the more dramatic, mysterious, ambient song that ends the credits of the first few, and it's a few later on too. I think Wanda's theme is great add to the list of lovely Marvel cinematic orchestral themes that exist. It's a great song, but it cannot compete to the ones you really want to get to. The ones where they're period piece singing ones, let's roll through them. At number 5 and 4, it was a tough bit between Making It Up As We Go Along and We've Got Something Cooking. I quite enjoy the Brady Bunch episode and thing, obviously. I really remember the Full House version, probably a little more from growing up, but when I think of the theme songs, I decided to give the Brady Bunch one a little leg up. We've Got Some Cooking, it just has a little more for me. Even though I do Making It Up As We Go Along is great, I took quite a few listens back and forth to decide between those two, but that's where I ended. Number 3, I don't think there's any doubt about it. A Newlywed Couple, the first of the songs, super good. I think people forget how good it is when they think as the songs have gone along, but it doesn't compare to the best two. And this is probably the biggest question, and I think I answered this on social media a while back of thinking, I don't know if Agatha All Along can top WandaVision. WandaVision's such a catchy bop. WandaVision, Wanda. It's so catchy and simple and elegant. But Agatha All Along has grown and grown and grown on me, and I don't think there can be any doubt that you have to give Agatha All Along, the latest of all these, has to be the best one. There's no doubt. So to recap, Agatha All Along just snuffs out WandaVision. Newlywed Couple comes in at 3. 4 and 5, really close, but gave We Got Something Cooking a little higher than Making Up As We Go Along. Give it Wanda's theme at 6, even though you guys may not count it. The Office version, WB 2007, and I'm sure some people love Let's Keep It Going. I do not. It is at number 8. List over. Well, we finally can put an end cap on WandaVision talk on this podcast until we get back to the relevant upcoming movies. But it was a great ride to be sure, and you can look forward to even more super content with the Snyder Cut and the Falcon and the Winter Soldier not too far away. But if you want to continue chatting about what was and the future for Wanda and Company, let me know on social at either knickknackmovies or knickknack_IC on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Don't forget, rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, leave a rate and review. It would be an absolute treat and a blast for me to read those all. Well, that's all for me. Signing off from this one, I'm still Nick, and until next time, cinephiles.
Are you not entertained?
I think this is gonna be the beginning of a beautiful friendship. I don't like goodbyes. Let's just call this see you later, Alex.